So what we're going to need is a foam pressed board. And we're going to measure approximately about 5.5, 6 inches. And then I just drew the line to line, and we're going to trim the doors down. I'm just going to kind of go by my popsicle sticks. So I'm not quite sure the absolute measurement here, but if you decide to use popsicle sticks with this choice, that'll be the measurement of choice, because I'm not mathematical, I'm artistical. That's right, my friends. That sounded wrong, but that's okay. Let's keep going. So we're going to cut out a base of our door here first with the foam board. And I'm going to need a little roof, so I'm going to hit that while I'm here as well. I wound up trimming down the roof, so you can just do it however what size you want, but I want to be using a thickness of a popsicle stick, which is about 1 inch. So I went a little bit overboard here when I first cut it, but you'll see later on here I'm going to trim that up and make that look super sharp and reinforce it as well. So here I'm just marking off the 2 pieces of the roof. Depending on the width of your door is going to be the length of your roof. So you can just play around with that. I'm not really doing any measurements here, so I'm sorry I can't really help you out with that. So I'm just a kind of a measure with your heart kind of gal, just same as when I would do little cooking witchery, it's a measure with your heart. Same as when I do my spells, measure with your heart. And it's kind of funny because I am an actual kind of like a hobbyist woodworker. You'd think I'd be interested in some math, but not really. I try to avoid it much as possible. So what I'm doing here next is I'm just trimming off the edges on a slight angle, about a 45-degree angle. I'm going to line up the 2 pieces together. Probably not a 45-degree angle I should have done. I should have probably, there we go. Now I'm like trimming it a little bit flatter because a 45 is just a little, it's going to create, well, it's going to create a boxy look. And we want more of a slanted look. And a little bit too much of a slant, so I'm going to trim it on the other side. And it wound up giving, that mistake wound up giving me a cool idea. Actually, there we go. So that fits super nice. But I really like how the bottom is trimmed off to one side, so I wound up hitting it on the other side. Of course, I got to balance it out, but I really like, I'm just going to kind of do some haphazard. Yeah. I'm just kind of figuring this door out as I go. There was not a real steadfast plan was when I was building this. I did have an idea I was going to use popsicle sticks and spackling. Above and beyond that, I was completely winging this as I was making this. So I'm feeling you can just have some fun, and there's no right or wrong when making these fun fairy doors. This fairy door is after my friend Claudette's cabin. I featured her on Smudging 101. She gave us an amazing insight on smudging, and this is one of the doors I had to make because of her fairy path at her house. As soon as I was walking the fairy path, I had an idea. I wonder if this was her place. So as I kept walking the fairy path, came across the guardians, I knew we were at Claudette and Brian's property. That was so cool. So excited to show you how I made this door. I like destination doors. I think they can be a lot of fun. I've made a couple of other fairy doors I'm going to feature here shortly. I'm just haven't filmed where they're going to end me up. I'm hoping one's going to end me up at a lake because I kind of colored the door blue, but we'll see. I'll film it. We'll see where I end up and see what happens. So stay tuned. If you want to see those videos, you may want to subscribe or ring that bell so you can see when the next destination doors end up. Now what I'm doing here, I'm going to reinforce the top of our little roof. I think it needs just a little bit more reinforcement. So just adding some hot glue and rocking that down, that'll create a lot thicker, and I think it'll look a little cool, give a wood effect to the top too. I'm probably going to paint that black, but it'll make it look cool anyway. It wasn't as sturdy as I thought it was going to be honest, so that's also why I decided to put the little wooden popsicle sticks as well. So we're going to let that cool down, and while that's cooling down, I'm just going to trim off the excess. Make that look super sharp. Yeah, I like the look of the smaller roof. It fits the size a little bit easier. I went a little bit too big when I first measured, so just ignore that. We'll just keep going along here. Okay, so grab some cheaper scissors so you don't wreck your good ones, and you can just cut right into this as long as everything is like really, really, really dry. And we're going to use my super sharp ones to cut through the wood and the foam board, and that seemed to turn out pretty good. There's my roof. That's going to turn out pretty cool. We got some dry decks here. This is spackling. It's pretty cool. It actually goes on pink. and it dries white. So when it's all done and said, it's all white and ready to go, so you can start painting. So I'm going to use a boar's hair paintbrush, just a cheap, super cheap brush with a really stiff bristle hair on it. So it's going to create some lines and some texture in there too. I want this to look like it is like the logs of a log cabin. So I would like that texture and that wood grain that's going to come in there. So we want to get a good healthy amount on this, get it in the cracks, smooth it out quite nice. But you do want about 1/8 of an inch thick coating on there. All right, so now I'm going to grab a little toothpick. You can grab a skewer if you'd like. Toothpick I found wound up being a little bit thinner, and we're going to now scribe in just some wood grain lines and check it out. Super easy, no right or wrong again. You want to make some little knots in there too, and then follow the wood grain along. Have some fun with it for sure. And I like adding the knots works too. So I did another knot work on the end and then just flowed the grain around. Let that dry for a while. While that's dry, I'm gonna take this earring. This is gonna go on the front door like a dream catcher because Claudette is one of the elders in our community. So I thought this would be a cool way to represent, and I'm gonna paint it black to make it look like wrought iron. Because on their actual door in their house, they actually have some wrought iron handlings and some brackets in that. It's really the hinges in that. It's really quite beautiful. So that's where that's going to live, right about there. Now, while that is drying, let us work on our stone path. Now, a little stone, this is going to be a little step in the front of the door. I'm going to bring in some polymer clay for this, just some white polymer clay. I'm going to paint it so it can be pretty much any color, working at warming it up a little bit first. And just pinching off little bits here. They do not need to be perfectly round because we're making stones. So we're going to line them up side by side. First, I'm going to grab some Mod Podge. You could use polymer clay special glue as well, but I found the Mod Podge works very well too. I did bake this in the oven at 135 degrees for 30 minutes as per what my polymer clay likes to dig on there. FYI, it was probably a bad idea that I put that in the oven. I should have probably cooked all the little stones separately, then glued them on, because the foam board is foam and toxic. So that was good times in my house. So don't copy what I did at all. We're just going to smooth out the edges here, squish that on, and that's when I baked it right around there. But it's best to bake all these little guys separately. So I've also made some little hinges there, you'll see on the left-hand side. And I have a little door knocker. We're going to hit all that today too. So we're going to get everything into a black coating first. So all the way around the edges as well. Don't forget the edges. And these are going to be my hinges. And my little door knocker. And I wound up painting this brass, changing my mind. I went silver, then painted it back to black again. And I prefer the black. It just looks cool. It looks kind of like a cast iron. Mixing some burnt, gorgeous orange in with some brown. Now I've done a full layer of just chocolate brown, thick paint on. Got in all the cracks on the door first. Now I'm mixing some brown and some burnt orange together. We're going to do some dry brushing. Just light, gentle strokes. Easy does it. Nice and light. If you got a little bit on, you can paint too much on, you can paint a little bit of brown over it again and just try it again. But once you start committing after the second layer, you're committed. So you kind of ought to just go for it. So it's all about layers when doing dry brushing. You can just have a lot of fun with it. Next up, I'm going to go in with a straight orange because our cabin does have an orange tinge to their logs, and bring that, and all the browns and the other burnt umbers were going to come through this as well when it dries out. It is just so beautiful. I love dry brushing. It's probably my favorite part of painting process. Look at that. And I feel I had a little bit too much orange here and there, so I just dried brush a little bit of straight brown over top of it. I went silver and then I changed my mind, but I got the silver on the little, I guess they'd be little screws if they would have, I guess they, I don't know, bolts if they would be back then. Super dry brush and very, very light. Let's bring out that wrought iron with that silver hue over top of it. Maybe a bit of a shine where it's worn down. Look at that. It just changes it. Changes it right up with a little bit of dry brushing. Now we're going to grab our little door handle here. Just a little bit of silver, dry brushing silver in. And just some little highlights, some little shines on it. The silver doesn't need to take over it unless you want more of a silver tinge with the, but I kind of like just the little highlights on it. So now we're bringing in some dark gray over top. It's better to kind of trash brush it on, dry brush it on, stamp it on. Just lay it out so it'll just play out itself. But you want to start off with the darkest gray first. Next, we're going to mix about a medium gray, and we're going to work our layers up to the lightest one. So just testing my color over top of the other one, and you can see there's a nice transition here. And now we're going to get into a lighter gray and just stamp it in, just super light, and just play it out. And there we have our nice little stones. I love it. I'm going to have to glue that to the bottom too. Now I found later when I carted it around a little bit, this door, and I brought it with me in my Jeep, and I went to show a friend, and the bottom broke off. So extra reinforcement with the hot glue. I didn't quite have enough there. So I'm going to add some black to our little rooftop here, and while we let that dry, then we can paint some moss. Everything I do, I keep moving. I got ADHD, so I don't let anything, while one's drying, let's hop to the next thing. Yeah, I switched that back to black, back and forth so many times. Now I'm just going to position and see where I think it would look cool. Just play around with some different configurations as always. But I think the hinges look a little bit better farther apart. Oh, and I realized I had my door knocker upside down. All right, now it's in a better spot. There we go. Might as well glue that one into place. I'm pretty happy where that one's going to live. Now I'm using gel glue. It's a Gorilla Glue super glue. Now next I'm going to add some moss green. I'm going to use a trash brush and super dry brush on. Can't forget a little bit of grass in the front. So I'm going to add the moss on the steps. That's a really nice kind of sagey olivey green. I'm going to put a bit of moss on the steps. And just trash brushing, dry brushing in some moss. It's out in the forest. It lives in the forest. It's got to have some moss. Can't forget the dream catcher to represent Elder Claudette. And then we have our cute little roof here. I cut out a piece of the foam board, a little triangle for the back there. And I'm going to add a bit of glue or a little bit of paint, black paint onto the top to hide that. And what I wound up doing with everything near the end is I wound up putting Mod Podge on absolutely everything to clear coat it. Thank you so very much for hanging out with me, going for a walk in the fairy forest, finding where the destination door led us today and making a fairy door. If you wish to see some more destination fairy doors, comment down below and have yourself an absolutely magical day.